Some mob murders, like that of Angelo Bruno, are carried out quickly, a single gunshot to the head. But there are others where the victims have suffered a more prolonged, agonising demise. I covered several of these in part 1, but let's check out a few more. Welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today we're going to take a quick look at a selection of particularly horrendous mob-related murders that you may not be familiar with. On September the 5th, 1939, mobster Irving Puggy Feinstein's charred body was found in a vacant lot near the area Flatlands in Brooklyn. Early indications suggested that before Puggy Feinstein's body was burnt, he'd been strangled and stabbed. However, it turned out that Feinstein's murder was more horrific than they initially realised. Murder Inc. hitman Abe "Kid Twist" Reles would later recall this murder after he had turned informer. In August 1939, a month before the Puggy Feinstein murder, Abe Reles remembers Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss coming to him stating that Albert Anastasia had personally given him a contract to kill Irving Feinstein. The excellent book Murder Inc. by Burton Turkus and Sid Fader details Reles' account of the murder. "I was at Albert's house for supper," Pittsburgh Phil announced, not without a certain pride. "Albert gave me a contract to take some guy." "Yeah? What for?" Reles was always interested in mob doings. "Albert says it's for Vince. This guy crosses Vince on something." "Who is the guy?" "I don't know. Some small fellow. His name is Puggy, with a pug nose. You can't miss him. He comes from Borough Park." The Vince mentioned is Vincent Mangano, the boss of the crime family that would eventually be known as the Gambino family. And the Albert, as I previously mentioned, was Albert Anastasia, Vincent Mangano's fearsome underboss. It is alleged by some sources that Irving Puggy Feinstein was a mobster involved in illegal gambling and labour racketeering with powerful Jewish gangster Louis Lepke Buckhalter. It is said by some that Puggy Feinstein was moving his small gambling operation into territory that wasn't his. In this case, the territory of Vincent Mangano. Albert Anastasia then spoke with Pittsburgh Phil Strauss and passed on Mangano's wishes that Puggy Feinstein be killed. The Murder Inc. assassins, known then as the Brownsville Boys, weren't too familiar with Puggy Feinstein and didn't know what he looked like. And so, for a couple of weeks, they struggled to find him. Then, fortuitously one day, Abe Reles, Pittsburgh Phil, and Martin Buggsy Goldstein were hanging out on their usual corner of Saratoga and Livonia Avenue in Brooklyn, when a small man approached them looking for an associate of theirs called Tiny, who he owed money to. The trio didn't recognise the man who was asking about Tiny, but couldn't believe their luck when he said his name was Puggy. Thinking quickly, the group of Reles, Strauss and Goldstein offered to help Puggy look for Tiny. Buggsy Goldstein then drove Puggy around for an hour, supposedly looking for Tiny. And Reles and Pittsburgh Phil went to Kid Twist's house to set up, ready to kill Feinstein. After driving around looking for Tiny, Martin Goldstein then led Puggy into Reles' house. As Feinstein enters, Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss jumps him from behind and puts him in a necklock. Puggy resists, fighting back, and bites Strauss on the hand. As Reles recalls of the murder, Puggy wiggles around and fights, so Harry throws him on the couch. Puggy starts hollering, don't hit me, I got the money." I put the radio on a little louder because Puggy is making noise. I go for the rope. I go back over to the couch with it, and Harry is saying, "The bastard bit me in the hand." Harry is like lying over Puggy, so he should not move. Buggsy is hitting him to make him quiet, pounding him. I give Harry one end of the rope, and I hold the other end. Puggy is kicking and fighting. He is forcing his head down so he can't get the rope under his throat. Buggsy holds his head up so he can put the rope under. Then me and Harry exchange the ends, cross them so we can make a knot, a twist. Then we cross them once more. Then we rope around his throat again to make 2 loops. Buggsy gets Puggy by the feet, and me and Harry get him by the head. We put him down on the floor. He is kicking. Harry starts finishing tying him up. I'm turning him and Harry gets his feet tied up with the back of his neck. He ties him up like a little ball. His head is pushed down on his chest. His knees are folded up against his chest. His hands are in between. The rope is around his neck and under his feet. If he moves, the rope will tighten up around his throat more. So essentially, to summarise Reles' account, Pittsburgh Phil became so enraged after being bitten by Puggy that he tied him up in such a manner between his neck and his feet that whenever Puggy struggled, he would slowly tighten the rope around his own neck. Strauss, Reles and Goldstein could then stand back and watch as Puggy Feinstein's desperate moves resulted in strangling himself to death. And as Reles testified, Puggy Feinstein defecated on the floor as he died. They then dumped his body in a vacant lot, poured gasoline all over it, and set his corpse on fire. Amazingly, whilst Puggy Feinstein was being murdered, Abe Kid Twist Reles' mother-in-law was asleep in another room of the house. And when they were setting up for the kill, Reles woke her and asked to borrow a rope and an ice pick. Reles documented this when he testified how he and Harry Pittsburgh Phil Strauss were preparing for the murder. Question: what happened then? Reles: he asked me, have I got a rope and an ice pick? I walk into the kitchen and I start looking. Harry goes to the refrigerator to get himself a glass of milk. Question: did you find the rope and ice pick? Reles: no. So I go into the bedroom where the old lady is sleeping. I ask her, where's the rope we used up at the lake last summer for the wash line? She says, down in the cellar in the valise. I go down and I get the rope. When I come up, I ask the old lady, where's the ice pick? She says, in the pantry. I go look in the pantry and I find it. Big Harry says to the old lady, friendly like, why don't you go back to sleep? The next excessively violent murder is alleged to have been the handiwork of future Genovese family powerhouse Tino Fiumara. On Saturday the 29th of March 1969, the decomposing body of 49-year-old Robert Harris was found wrapped in a blanket and dumped in a landfill situated in Kearny, New Jersey. Robert Bobby Harris Jr., a black civic leader in the community, was also suspected by the police of running a large bookmaking business that catered mostly to African American numbers players in Bergen, Essex and Passaic counties. Robert Harris had disappeared on the 3rd of January 1969, with his wife reporting him missing the following day. As one newspaper reports on the discovery of Harris's corpse, the body of 49-year-old Harris, who lived in Montclair, was wrapped in a blanket, hands and feet bound, the skull battered and with multiple fractures all over, according to the Hudson County Medical Examiner's autopsy report. Further details would emerge regarding the torture and beating that Harris had sustained prior to his death, as reported by Jerry Capisi. His skull was crushed, his spine was broken, the ribs on the right side of his body were caved in, 9 ribs on the left side were fractured, as was his right leg. For good measure, Harris was shot once in the chest. He was in a kneeling position, with his ankles tied to the back of his head with wire. Thanks to information provided by informants, the authorities had long suspected that the man responsible for the torture and murder of Robert Harris was mobster Tino Fiumara. At the time of the Harris murder, Tino Fiumara was 28 years old. He had started his criminal career associated with the crew of legendary New Jersey mobster and Genovese captain Richie The Boot Boiardo. When this crew was split between various mobsters in the mid-1960s, Fiumara found himself under Eugene Catena, brother of Genovese family powerhouse Jerry Catena, and then Eugene's successor, Peter Lodi Pete Lepke. It was while serving under Genovese captain Peter Lepke in 1969 that Tino Fiumara is believed to have battered Robert Harris horrifically with a baseball bat before ending him with a bullet to the chest. The motive for the torture and murder of Robert Harris has been put down to a dispute over turf. And informants would also state that the then 28-year-old Tino Fiumara drove around with Harris's tied-up corpse to ensure that other rival gangsters knew that the Genovese family was very serious about their control of all bookmaking operations in New Jersey. Over the years, the greatly feared Tino Fiumara would rise up the ranks, becoming captain, and would eventually be part of the ruling panel of the Genovese crime family. Many mob commentators had at one point considered Tino Fiumara a possible candidate for the position of boss of the famous crime family. Next up is the brutal murder of Sam Monaco, a powerful New Jersey-based mobster during the Prohibition era. On the 13th of September 1931, the body of New Jersey mobster Sam Monaco was seen floating in Newark Bay off Bayonne. Sam Monaco was a powerful mobster who, depending on the source, was underboss to Elizabeth crime family boss Stefano Badami. The Elizabeth crime family being an alleged forerunner to what would become known as the DeCavalcanti family years later. Another body washed up the same day as Sam Monaco's. This belonged to Louis Russo. The pair were last seen alive on the 10th of September, leaving their office in Monaco's car. As one newspaper reports, Monaco and Russo carried on a coal and ice business in Newark, which police say was merely a blind for a bootleg racket. They were last seen alive Thursday, leaving their office in Monaco's high-priced car. New York police later found the car in West 49th Street, 2 windows smashed. The heavy end of a billiard cue and a man's hat were found in the machine. Scott Dietschy's excellent book Garden State Gangland provides further details of Monaco and Russo's demise. The first body was identified as Sam Monaco, Badami's underboss. When police fished Monaco's body out of Newark Bay, they found his head and jaws beaten in, his body tied with a clothesline, weighted down by 4 sash weights. Harrison police also discovered the body of another New Jersey mobster, Louis Babe Ruth Russo. His body also showed the same signs of head trauma, though he was weighted down by a large rock. Other sources state that Sam Monaco's body was found with a lead pipe hammered into his rectum. The murders of Sam Monaco and Louis Russo helped contribute to a famous American Mafia myth. The date that Monaco and Russo were murdered was the 10th of September 1931, which was the same day that Charlie Luciano arranged the murder of boss of bosses Salvatore Maranzano. The murders of Monaco, Russo and a handful of others that day led to the myth known as the Night of the Sicilian Vespers, when allegedly Maranzano's loyalists were taken out. However, there is evidence to the contrary that suggests that those murdered were killed for completely separate reasons and not because they were Maranzano loyalists. The date that they were all killed being purely a coincidence. However, I will cover this in a separate video. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.